Have you ever been there? You held the door for someone in a hurry. You offered a ride to a stranded friend. You stayed late to help a coworker finish a project. You gave your all, expecting nothing in return. Maybe just a simple thank you, a small acknowledgement, a memory of your kindness. But the phone never rings. The text never comes. You see them later, as if your act of service never happened. They have moved on. They have forgotten. The sting of being forgotten. A silent ache that whispers you don't matter. A loneliness that settles deep when you feel left behind by those you helped lift up. This feeling is not new. It's an ancient hurt in the heart of a young man named Joseph. He was a good man, a faithful man. He did the right thing even when it cost him everything. Yet he ended in profound forgottenness. A dark, damp prison cell in a foreign land, betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused by his master's wife, now about to be overlooked by someone whose future he held in his hands. It's achingly familiar to anyone poured out and met with silence. For the overlooked, the passed over, the ones left waiting, the story unfolds in the most unlikely of places. Not a palace, not a temple, but a prison. Genesis chapter 40 opens with a simple statement. Sometime after this, the cupbearer and his baker committed an offense against the king. Two high-ranking officials, men who served in Pharaoh's presence, suddenly found themselves in disgrace. The cupbearer, the chief butler, was a man of immense trust. He tasted the king's wine to protect him from poison. The chief baker was responsible for the king's bread. Their fall from grace was swift and severe. They landed in the very same prison where Joseph was held captive. By this point, Joseph had already endured the unthinkable. He had been sold into slavery by his own jealous brothers. He rose to a position of trust in Potiphar's house, then was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife when he fled her advances, from a pit to Potiphar's house, and from Potiphar's house to a prison pit. It seemed his life was a series of downward spirals. Yet even in the darkness of the dungeon, Joseph's character shone brightly. The warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. His integrity and faithfulness were so evident that his jailer trusted him completely. These two disgraced officials were placed under Joseph's direct care. Genesis 44. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a divine appointment. God was moving the chess pieces on his grand board. He brought a problem to the one man in all of Egypt who held the solution. Think about it. Joseph could have been bitter. He could have been angry. He could have been resentful. He could have been unwilling to help anyone. But that was not Joseph's way. He didn't see prisoners. He saw people. He didn't see their crimes. He saw their humanity. Even in his own pain, he was attentive to the pain of others. He served them. He ministered to them. He noticed their downcast faces. This is the heart of a man who, despite being forgotten by the world, had not forgotten his God. His prison became his parish. His duties became his ministry. He was exactly where God wanted him to be. God was using Joseph's faithfulness in the small things to prepare him for the very big things that were just around the corner. One morning, the prison air was thick with more than the usual gloom. Joseph came to the butler and the baker and saw that they were dejected. They looked troubled, their faces etched with a worry that went deeper than their confinement. Being the compassionate man he was, Joseph asked a simple, caring question. Why are your faces so sad today? He didn't have to ask. He could have just brought them their meager rations and moved on. But Joseph noticed. He cared. His own suffering had not calloused his heart, it had softened it. The chief butler went first. He described his dream with vivid detail. In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. It was a dream of his former life, a vision of restoration. Then, the chief baker, seeing that the interpretation of the first dream was likely positive, felt emboldened to share his own. There were 3 cake baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket, there were all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. A sense of dread must have hung in the air as he finished his story. Faced with these 2 mysterious and troubling dreams, Joseph did not puff out his chest. He did not claim to have any special power of his own. His response is one of the most beautiful displays of humility in all of Scripture. Before he even heard the details, he gently redirected their attention. He looked at these two anxious men and said, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." What a powerful statement. Joseph made it crystal clear that he was not the source of the wisdom. He was simply a channel. He was a vessel, ready to be filled and used by the Almighty. He knew that any insight he could offer would not come from him, but through him. This humility is staggering when you consider his circumstances. He had every right to be cynical, yet here he was, in a filthy prison, pointing powerful men toward his God. He wasn't trying to make a name for himself. He was trying to make God's name known. With God as his declared source, Joseph confidently interpreted the butler's dream. "This is its interpretation," he said. "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly, when you were his cupbearer." After delivering the wonderful news of restoration to the chief butler, Joseph made a simple, heartfelt request. "Only remember me, when it is well with you. Please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon." This was not a demand. It was a vulnerable plea from a man who had been wronged at every turn. It was the cry of an innocent heart. Notice the simple honesty in his words. I was indeed stolen. He doesn't go into the gut-wrenching details of his brother's betrayal. He simply states the fact. He was kidnapped from his homeland. Then he adds, "And here also, I have done nothing." He maintains his innocence in the matter of Potiphar's wife. He wasn't seeking vengeance. He was seeking vindication. He just wanted the truth to be known. He was asking the butler, a man who was about to be restored to a position of influence, to be his advocate, to speak a good word for him, to be the key that could finally unlock his prison door and set him free. This moment reveals the beautiful, aching humanity of Joseph. 3 days. That was the timeline Joseph had given, a direct interpretation from God. For 3 days, the prison must have been electric with anticipation and dread. The butler, filled with nervous excitement, likely replayed Joseph's words over and over in his mind. Restoration. Freedom. Back in his prestigious role. His name cleared. His heart must have soared with gratitude for the young Hebrew who had deciphered his dream. For the baker, those 3 days must have been an agonizing crawl toward doom. Every shadow, every sound. 2 men in the same prison, hearing from the same prophet, awaited 2 vastly different destinies. The 3rd day arrived, and it happened to be Pharaoh's birthday. The palace was alive with celebration, a grand feast for all his officials. In the midst of this royal party, Pharaoh turned his attention to his imprisoned servants. He made a feast for all his servants, lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer, lifted up the head of the chief baker. The prophecy was coming to pass, exactly as Joseph had said. God's word, spoken through a humble prisoner, was proving true in the court of the most powerful king on earth. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. The dream of the baskets and the birds also came true, in all its grim detail. This part of the story is a stark reminder that God is not only a God of restoration, but also a God of judgment. Joseph, as God's faithful messenger, had delivered both truths without flinching. The butler was free. He was restored. He was back in the palace, enjoying the favor of the king. His heart was surely filled with gratitude, and now was the moment to fulfill his promise, the moment to remember the young man in the dungeon, the moment to speak a word to Pharaoh, to mention the innocent Hebrew who could interpret dreams, who longed for justice. But the final verse of the chapter lands like a punch to the gut. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. He forgot. All that hope, that desperate plea, that fragile promise. It all vanished into the busyness and excitement of his newfound freedom. Can you feel the heartbreak in that verse? Joseph, waiting in the dungeon, must have counted the days. He would have listened for footsteps, for the sound of the guard calling his name. One day turned into a week turned into a month turned into a year, and then another. 2 full years. The silence was deafening. The man he had helped, the man whose life was restored because of a word from God through him, had completely forgotten him. This is perhaps the cruelest blow of all. Betrayed by his brothers, forgotten by his friend. If ever there was a time for faith to die, this was it. But God had not forgotten Joseph. The butler's forgetfulness was not a mistake. It was part of God's perfect, sovereign plan. If the butler had remembered Joseph right away, Joseph might have been released and sent back to Canaan. But God had a bigger plan. He wasn't just planning to get Joseph out of prison. He was planning to put Joseph in charge of the entire nation of Egypt to save the world from a catastrophic famine. The timing wasn't right. Pharaoh didn't need a dream interpreter yet. So God, in his infinite wisdom, allowed the butler to forget. He allowed Joseph to wait. The delay was not a denial. It was a divine setup for a much bigger comeback. This is the ultimate message of Genesis 40 for you and for me. People will let you down. Friends will forget. Promises will be broken. But God never forgets. His word is always true, and his timing is always perfect. When you feel overlooked, remember Joseph. When you feel stuck in a holding pattern, trust that God is working behind the scenes. Your current prison, whether it's a difficult job, a painful relationship, or a season of loneliness, is not the end of your story. It may be the very place God is preparing you for your purpose. Don't lose hope. Keep serving, keep trusting, and hold on. God remembers you. And when his time comes, he will lift up your head. Read Genesis 40 for yourself and let the faithfulness of God strengthen your heart today.